primavera. Hello, class. I see all of you that have decided to join me today for Astounding Arts and Crafty Crafts. Today we are going to begin learning knitting, and this is a first-year project, and I know Astounding Arts and Crafty Crafts are electives, but there are specialties within it, and knitting is one of them. And so this is a beginning knitting lesson, and today we're going to make skimpy scarves. We'll have lots of fun with these. I was going to make them in the Burrowgroves house colors, but I was specifically requested to make these for the house colors of a particular school that we will not mention that is far away. So we are going to use number 2 needles, but you can also use number 1. The sizing's on it, and yeah. And then I have a bunch of scrap yarn, a little needle that's for stitching in yarn, and sometimes you need a crochet hook the smallest size for when you drop a stitch. And before we begin, I just wanted to explain there's 2 kinds of knitting. Over in the traditional knitting way in Europe and in China is called Continental or left-handed knitting. But in the New World, we always like to do everything different for no reason. So we knit the opposite side, right-handed, and it's called the American way or right-handed. And just to tell you, the Continental or left-handed way is actually better. Like, it's much faster, but I happen to learn both, but I'm more comfortable with the New World right-handed way because this is where I live, and so I don't usually go to China or to England or Germany or those places where they do the Continental version. So you will see as I'm showing you the left-handed way, which is actually more efficient and smarter and faster, that I'm a little more awkward with it because I don't do it as often. I do the right-handed way more often, which is a little bit silly way to knit, but it is the way I'm used to, and so I've gotten much quicker at it. Whichever way you decide to learn, the more you do it, the quicker you'll get. But generally, the left-handed or Continental way is generally quicker, takes less movement, as you will see. But we will try both today. We will learn both methods, and it's nice to know both because then you can have one color in one hand and another color in the other hand, and if you happen to be doing different colors very often, you can switch back and forth between the two. Very useful trick.
So these skimpy scarves are good as Yuletide Christmas tree ornaments. They can also be worn as a bracelet, used as a bookmark,
or as earrings.
You can decide for yourself how wide you want the stripes, which colors you want to use, that sort of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is cast on, and as you can see, you make this loop. You just follow along with me. You can make 2 loops, and then you slip the needle through the one and over the other, and then pull it tight. So we're going to do our first knit stitch, and we are doing a most efficient way to cast on all of our stitches. So you just put the needle through just like I'm showing here. And this is the American way or right-handed way. So the trick for this cast on method is you put the needle in between the 2 stitches. The 2 end stitches, you put it in between, loop it around, pull it through, and then put it on the other needle. And see, we've already created 3 stitches, and you do this as often as you need to get as many stitches as you need for your project. We are going to do just 6 stitches for the skimpy scarves, but I know a friend recently who had to cast on 350 stitches because she was knitting a castle.
And voila, you have a skimpy scarf. Isn't that great? Hello, I'm in the middle of class. What? I need to go a little slower? Oh yeah, I know they're first-year students, and they know. Okay, I'll teach them properly. All right, never mind. Okay, let's go a little more step by step.
So for the knit stitch, we're going to be pushing the needle through from the back, as you can see. You loop it around and then slide it off, and now it's on the right-hand needle. And we do this with each stitch. This is called the knit stitch. And since this is a beginning project, we're going to be doing the knit stitch on both the front and the back of the skimpy scarves. Later you'll learn some more advanced, or the next stitch you can learn, but we're just doing the first stitch, which is called the knit stitch. So when you do knit stitch on both front and back, it's called the garter stitch. So now you flip it over, and we're going to do it again on the back. We're going to do knit stitch with each one. you can decide how long you want your rows to go, how much of your colors you want, how many rows you want to do. So I've done about 8 rows and now I'm ready to add my second color. So I'm going to loop the black as if I'm going to do it like a normal knit stitch, but then I add the gray and I looped them both together. So they're both together now. But then to keep going, I'm going to pick up my new color. You just want them both looped at the very beginning of the row there so that they're both in there. But now we have our second color. So when I come to that first stitch where they're both looped together, I'm going to make sure I knit through both of them as if they were one piece of yarn.
Here, when you're doing, sometimes you get these long loops when you're doing like several rows with just one color, the other color just kind of dangles there. But then here I did shorter rows and then I knitted those extra strands in, so you see it's no longer making those loops. I'm doing 3 colors here. So what I do something called carrying the yarn. So each time I start a new color, I do all 3. That loops them in to the edges and then you don't have those big long strands. Let's go with green. So the other thing you'll notice here, you might notice, is that the green is kind of pulling in and looks different. It's because I'm using scrap yarn and it is a different weight. It's a thinner yarn, if you can see, than the other 2. And if I wanted to, I could double up the green to make it about as thick as the others. But if you go buy your yarn at a yarn store, just make sure you get all of your yarn colors are worsted weight, which is this thicker yarn, and then they will all match up better. You can see how the black and the gray match up just fine, just that the green is because it's thinner, it's pulling in, but that's okay. All right, so we're doing some more green here. You know, the Slytherins like to do things differently, or the ones with these colors, and so I'm just deciding as I go how wide each row will be. So here I have all 3 of these colors together. I'm going to make sure I knit into all 3 of those. So that catches up those extra yarn pieces and you don't have them sticking like that. And then plus, again, if you have shorter rows, you're not going to have bigger strands of yarn. Here I'm going to start a new color. So again, I would just simply take all 3 colors, loop them through, and then I will start my new color.
So just keep knitting, following the pattern of rows if you've decided on a pattern, until the scarf is as long as you want it.
Okay, to finish off the edging, in the second stitch, I'm going to go back and loop this over that one very carefully. And then I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to go to the first stitch and loop it over the one that's on the stick very carefully so they don't both come off. This is finishing off the edge. So then you're left with only one loop. I'm going to cut the yarn, and while we're at it, I can cut the other ones as well. I can take this knitting, this is a special needle for yarn and knitting, and I'm going to run it through that loop to lock it in place.
Then we can just weave this in and out within the yarn. We're going to hide it within the yarn. I like to make it nice and square. I go through once and then I go through the opposite direction a little bit more. And then you can trim off the excess. And then we do the same thing with these. Cut this a little short.
I'm going to weave the same color together with the same color so that it's not noticeable.
And then we're going to do the same thing over here. Now I wanted to show you a trick. If you do have these loops and you don't really want them in the finished product, we can kind of loop them in to the edge here. While I'm weaving this in and out, I can loop it in. This one's a little short. We leave here if the yarn's a little longer. So I've kind of secured that against the side there. This one's a little short, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it. Alright, so I want this to be in the green, and I'd kind of like to leave some of these in, kind of securing them before I weave it in it. Oops. So if your yarn's a little short or your needle's a little long, you can go ahead and get the needle ready and then weave it through. When weaving it through, you're not pulling it super tight. You kind of want it to stay kind of squarish. There you go. It might be a little wonky, but then this is School of Magic. It's
So we're casting on our 6 stitches just like we did before, but now we're going to learn the left-handed or continental method of knitting. So for left-handed knitting, you're going to have the yarn held loosely in your left hand, and then you push the needle through and you simply hook it onto it. Instead of having to loop it around with your right hand, you're just going to hook it with that needle, pull it through, and voila! It's much simpler, quicker, more efficient movement. And again, the more you do it, the quicker you'll get at it. But the yarn just stays all in the left hand, so it's right there where you need it to where you can easily hook it. So here I'm showing you an example of having one color on the left hand and a different color on the right hand. And if you do this method, sometimes you have patterns where you need to switch colors every few stitches. And so then it's quite nice to be able to do both right-handed and left-handed knitting. In this case, we're actually only doing the same color across the whole row, so it's not as important. But You can see here how if you know both methods, you can have one in one hand and another color in the other hand and just keep them running along and easily go back and forth between the two colors. So students, here is quiz time. Which method of knitting am I doing here? Please leave your answer in the cunning comments below. So I don't want those long loops, so even though I'm not actually switching colors, here I'm going every 2 or 3 rows, I'm hooking both colors in just so that they're attached to the side of the scarf. And then I just continue with the current color. And now we're finishing off the edge of this one. So here I'm going to count my rows because on this one I wanted, sometimes you want it to be an even number of rows with each color, so you can double check them and count them so that you make them all even as you continue to knit. So second quiz, which style of knitting am I doing here? Leave it in the cunning comments below. Oh no, I dropped a stitch. So this is when a crochet hook comes in handy, because if you drop a stitch and it pulls, each loop will pull out of the one before it, and pretty soon it's like a run in your stocking all the way down your knitting. So what you do is you stop knitting and you grab this crochet hook and you go through that loop and you're gonna hook back the one that had fallen out of it, and then you can slip it back onto the needle. And if it ends up creating a run, you might have to do this several times to get it back up to where it was before, but it's not hard. And here you go, you have your skimpy scarves. Slumber slower, slumber slower.